Thanks very much. We kind of, our next presentation is actually two sides of the same story again, to go back to Tanya's presentation. Firstly, we've got some input from HSE, from Melanie, who's one of the inspectors with the Health and Safety Executive. But then we have Andy King. Sorry, I'm just reading his name down here. Sorry, Andy. That's what happens when we change names at the last minute, and we coerce people into doing things that they'd rather be busy working back in the office. But what we're looking at is this hydrocarbon release best practice plans, and that sense that, you know, how do we improve, how do we continue to reduce our hydrocarbon release performance? There is some good news out there, and I'll leave Melanie to tell us about that. But get that sense of what the regulator expects, but also what we can do as an industry, and having that perspective, which is very, very helpful. So I'll ask Melanie to come up and give us input from the regulator. Thank you.
This presentation will cover the strategic approach by the oil and gas industry to achieve its target of a 50% reduction in hydrocarbon releases, and Energy Division's approach to regulating the sector and its expectations for all parties. The principal major hazard risks that could cause the death of many offshore workers, fire and explosion associated with the ignition of hydrocarbon releases, and loss of structural integrity and stability are well known. So are the precautions. HSE and industry have made many attempts to ensure that these risks are consistently well managed across the industry. These attempts have only been partially successful. In 2010, the UK oil and gas industry set a target of a 50% reduction in hydrocarbon releases over a 3-year period. And you achieved, in practice, a 49% reduction. So building on this improvement, in 2013, you again committed to a target of a 50% reduction in hydrocarbon releases. This is picked up in HSE's offshore strategy for 2014 to 17. And one of the areas we are looking at is the hydrocarbon release reduction programme. And the offshore strategy covers not only what Energy Division will do to regulate the sector, but also what oil and gas operators, contractors, and other industry stakeholders should do to improve the health and safety performance of the industry. The strategic aim in our strategy is there is the continuous reduction in hydrocarbon releases offshore. And the objective for the 3 years of our strategy is that your 50% reduction target is achieved by the 31st of March 2016. We know the typical sources of hydrocarbon releases. They're from the wells, they're from the pipeline risers and other pipelines, and pipework and associated process plant. As we've seen from the early presentations, releases can occur from either the failure of the asset itself due to corrosion, abrasion or fracture, or because of failures of maintenance, for example, the poor practice when breaking and remaking joints, insufficient operational controls. However, hydrocarbon releases can also result from damage due to other failures, for example, dropped objects from the crane operations. To ensure that everyone stays focused and targeted, Industry Division has drawn up an implementation plan, setting out what it will be expecting from all parties. First of all, what can you expect from Energy Division? We will deliver interventions in line with the duty holder intervention plans that have been shared with the duty holders that are targeted and prioritised interventions across all the installations in the UK continental shelf, and will score the performance of the operator against the benchmarks in our guidance for the life of the strategy. And to provide a framework for sensible discussions between ourselves and the duty holders for these interventions, we have produced a set of guidance which will address what we think are the main issues underlying hydrocarbon releases. So we'll be focusing on well competence, the people, well control, the kit, loss of containment, process and people, control of work, again, the process and the people. We'll look at SCEs, verification, operational risk assessments. we'll look at management of maintenance. And the focus of our interventions will be on the duty holders' arrangements for monitoring the effectiveness of their control measures in place to manage the risks that they themselves have identified. In our assessment work, we will ensure that design notifications and all new safety cases for production installations make positive demonstrations that hydrocarbon release risks are logged throughout the life of the installation. And when we inspect thorough review summaries, again, we'll be looking for specific information about how hydrocarbon releases are going to be reduced. Our incident investigation policy remains unchanged. There will be mandatory investigations of hydrocarbon releases in line with our published guidance. Step change, why we're here. What is HSE and Step Change trying to achieve? We want to share examples of good practice and investigation findings. We want to explore with the various working groups developments of barrier key performance indicators so we get a common suite that we can all work to and measure against. Step change, we've heard the work that's being done with SAIDI and the analysis, and that proves useful to us as well as yourselves. Duty holders, we'll be urging you to report hydrocarbon release incident investigation findings onto the database. We'll be looking to the operators and duty holders to review and update their reduction plans as required. We'll be looking at the toolkits that are being produced by Step Change, and we'll be asking, are you using this? What use do you make of this? How is it being received? How is it helping you? And therefore, we'll be assessing duty holders' performance on a range of factors, the technical standards that their installation meets, their major hazard risk control systems, the leadership, and we'll be using the information in our inspection guides to tell us how we can score the duty holders' performance in those particular areas. And that will then allow us to inform our future interventions. In other words, we go to the places where there's most need for us to inspect. 2013, the commitment to reduce hydrocarbon releases. When we analysed the data from April to October of that year, there was a 30% increase in hydrocarbon releases, and that prompted our then head of division to write to all the operators and the trade associations, letting them know what was happening, and we required operators to review their reduction plans, share learning from incidents, and explain the personal actions that they were taking to support the hydrocarbon release reduction programme. We've had responses from the majority of those operating in the UK continental shelf, and we've assessed their record on hydrocarbon releasing and their responses to the letter, and that has identified 12 installations which have below average performance. So in addition to the targeted programme across the UK continental shelf, the duty holders for these 12 installations will be the focus of specific interventions, and they will focus on how the duty holders are checking the health of the relevant preventive, protective and mitigatory measures in line with our HID-ED regulatory model. So how robust are your management arrangements for checking that the control measures are working as intended, that any failures in any of your control measures are identified, and that appropriate remediation plans are in place? So what does Energy Division expect from its operators and duty holders? We expect analysis. Has been touched on, it's not just your own incidents and the findings for your own installations, but from across the wider sector. There's a lot of information on the SAIDI database that you can learn from. Benchmarking. Our inspection guides identify key legislation, supporting standards and guidance, and that can be used proactively by duty holders to identify any measures they need to implement to meet the required standards before we arrive on the installation. And it forms the basis of a dialogue if we do feel there are deficiencies. Barrier health. How do you reassure yourselves that control measures are implemented, that operating procedures are followed, and that they both remain effective, and that any deviations are identified and managed? For action plans, we're looking for something that's time-bound and technically justified, with measurable outcomes, and that is then monitored to ensure it remains on track and it's delivering what you've expected it to deliver. And installation specific, you have to focus on the particular areas with the greatest potential to lead to hydrocarbon releases. A hydrocarbon release reduction plan by itself will not deliver an improved performance. However, a targeted plan, correctly implemented, properly monitored to ensure the desired outcomes are delivered, and regularly reviewed to ensure it remains current, should provide the assurance that we're all looking for, that operators are managing their hydrocarbon inventory. There has been some good progress since 2013, and for the period to the end of the 24th of October in 2013-14, there had been 73 releases reported. For the same period this year, it's 52. So that upward trend is coming down, but as has been said, it's not about numbers. It's why the releases are still happening. What are we not spotting? What can we learn from each other? Thank you.